Well, hello out there. Welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. My name is Daniel, and this is my father, Dr. Kaplan. And together we're going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year, doing a little bit every day. Today we'll be reading Genesis 21:5 through 21. Then we'll discuss it afterwards. We're going to read from the Robert Alter translation. All right, 21:5. And Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac his son was born to him. And Sarah said, Laughter has God made me. Whoever hears will laugh at me. And she said, Who would have uttered to Abraham, Sarah is suckling sons, for I have borne a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. And she said to Abraham, Drive out this slave girl and her son, for the slave girl's son shall not inherit with my son, with Isaac. And the thing seemed evil in Abraham's eyes because of his son. And God said to Abraham, Let it not seem evil in your eyes on account of the lad and on account of your slave girl. Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her voice, for through Isaac shall your seed be acclaimed. But the slave girl's son too I will make a nation, for he is your seed. And Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, placing them on her shoulder. And he gave her the child and sent her away, and she went wandering through the wilderness of Beersheba. And when the water in the skin was gone, she flung the child under one of the bushes and went off and sat down at a distance, a bow shot away, for she thought, Let me not see when the child dies. And she sat at a distance and raised her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad, and God's messenger called out from the heavens and said to her, What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the lad's voice where he is. Rise, lift up the lad, and hold him by the hand, for a great nation will I make him. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water, and gave to the lad to drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew up and dwelled in the wilderness, and he became a seasoned bowman. And he dwelled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife from the land of Egypt. All right, so um, what comes to mind first when you read through this section?
Well, again, it's messy, but it was intended that these two separate and have their separate identities and separate destinies. Uh, but as I said, Abraham does come across, maybe doesn't come across so positively here. Uh, as we read the account, she says, "Cast out the bondwoman." Yeah, no, it does say the matter was displeasing to Abraham. Oh, I see. And then God said to Abraham to do it. So, and I get so as I said, in a way, maybe Sarah comes across maybe negatively, but she had her reasons because Ishmael was not behaving properly towards his half brother. So that was her reason that she felt like they needed to separate. And evidently, God said, He said yes. Let them separate. And as I said, they did have separate destinies, but we have here the some historical background to the origin of the Arab peoples, and we see that Ishmael was the son of Abraham and Hagar, so he was in that sense half Egyptian, and then Hagar takes a woman of Egypt to marry him, so there's a lot of Egyptian background in the Arabic line, but later on we also have uh, Joseph marrying a woman of Egypt and having Ephraim and Manasseh. So we have half Egyptian grandsons of Jacob.
Very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of play with language here in terms of the laughing because you have Sarah talking about laughing in a joyful way, in like an incredulous way. Who would have thought such a thing would happen? And then you have a dismissive laughing from Hagar as well. Later in the account, you'll have laughing being used in a sexual way. So they constantly are playing with the term laughing with Isaac, and it's to me it shows you in some ways Isaac is kind of, because he's a Christ type, in many ways. You have this embodiment of joy concept with him, and all of that entails, and some of that is, the dismissiveness of it, and then also the beauty of it at the same time. It's quite nuanced. It's very beautiful.
Let me just again say that God Himself said to Abraham, "This is what you need to do." So evidently Ishmael was really misbehaving here, and perhaps his mother as well. So, and they were in effect punished for that. But although punished, nevertheless God was still working with them. So they, just like with Israel, Israel gets punished, but then returns from captivity. So in effect, Hagar and Ishmael were punished, but nevertheless, then God intervened and work things out for them.
Well, certainly a mockery, to deal with mockery is not evil. I mean, it kind of brings to mind like Psalm 2 and the people mocking God's son. And again, if Isaac is a type of Christ, you have the same sort of thing going on in the nations of the world, and this isn't going to become another nation as well. Um, One thing that it also has a parallel to is how in the account of Mary and Joseph, you have God having to visit Joseph and kind of clear the air a little bit about what's going on there as well. Even though this is an awkward situation for you, take Mary to be your wife and all of this stuff. So, um, it's not a direct parallel, but it is there. It's kind of interesting.
God heard the voice of the lad. It's interesting. That's the name, Ishmael. God will hear. So the wordplay continues. And it's interesting that in the Muslim religion, I suppose most descendants of Ishmael are Muslims. They're supposed to pray 5 times a day, and the muezzin calls out, God is great, and then they're supposed to stop and pray 5 times a day. That kind of goes back to the name Ishmael. God will hear.
And ultimately, it ends on a positive note for them because they have this water, which is a sign that they're of abundance and everything. And then it says God was with him, and it says that he became a seasoned bowman, so he was certainly able to provide for himself. And the fact that it makes such an emphasis of that in terms of the skill of that and all of that, that certainly means something, especially again when you think of the audience of who this was speaking to. That would have been a highly valued ability to have, a very admirable trait to have, I would think.
So there is this rivalry between Isaac and Ishmael, but fortunately, if you go to Genesis 25, it does seem they finally do reconcile. With the death of Abraham, they come together to bury him. But there is this tension to some degree between Isaac and Ishmael. And there was another thought that I wanted to bring out. Yes, this is very important from a New Testament point of view. The Apostle Paul makes a lot of use of this chapter, of this material in the book of Galatians. There's some spiritual lessons here in terms of the first century and Judaism and Christianity and the relationship that they had. You might say the two spiritual brothers, the two monotheistic religions, and their interaction and what Paul says about it. It's interesting to look at this chapter, then to go into Galatians, which later on we'll be covering, God willing.
And I'm sure that'll be fun. And if you're interested, you're like, ooh, Galatians. Well, you can always follow us. Any other comments you have about this section?
No, as I said, we'll be coming back to it later on when we get into the epistles.
And if you want to see that, then like, subscribe, hit the bell, tell your friends, comment below. I'm sure you might have some thoughts about Galatians, so you've been spoiled a little bit, although we've told you. We're going to go through the general epistles as well on this channel. We'll be doing that on a weekly basis, and we have it all divided up. That's not something that has a traditional division, unfortunately, that I'm aware of, but we've divided it up based on keeping the portions about the same length, and we'll be going through those as well. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow.